Welcome to Public Speaking with Peter George. Do you want to be calm, confident, and credible every time you speak in public? Then stay tuned as Peter and his guests discuss public speaking tips, techniques, and tactics that help you increase your impact, influence, and income. Here's your host, Peter George.
My guest this week is John Jantsch. John's a veteran marketing speaker and workshop leader with over 200 successful events under his belt. Event organizers and attendees frequently comment on the nature of the practical, actionable takeaway value of his presentations. John is also the author of the best-selling book, Duct Tape Marketing. In this show, John and I are going to discuss how writing a book can launch your speaking career, or if you already have a speaking career, catapult it to new heights. If you're thinking about writing a book, you definitely want to listen to John's advice. John, welcome to the Speaker Station. It's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Well, thanks. I'm excited to be here.
We're going to discuss how writing, publishing, and marketing a book can benefit a speaker. But first, can you tell us about your new book that you're working on?
Well, sure. So I have written 5 books, owned my own business for coming up on 30 years. And during that whole time, it's all been about marketing. All my books are essentially about marketing. And for my next book, I wanted to do something a little different. And so I'm kind of mining sort of my, I don't know, maybe we'll call it wisdom of being in business, being an entrepreneur for many years. And so the title of the book is The Self-Reliant Entrepreneur. And it's set up as a daily kind of meditation. So there are 366 pages, and every day you open it up and it says July 1st or July 2nd, and you read that days. There's no how-to necessarily, and it's more kind of inspirational, point of view about, what it takes to be a self-reliant entrepreneur. And some of your listeners may pick up on that title, self-reliance, and remember that Ralph Waldo Emerson in the mid-19th century wrote an essay that is really very popular with a lot of entrepreneurs because it essentially talked about the idea of thinking for yourself and not worrying about what the world does or what others say, and kind of doing your thing based on what you need to do, for your unique way of doing things. And so I went back in mind for every page the literature of that time, because that was sort of the first countercultural period in the United States. You think about the 1850s, we were on the edge of the Civil War. That's when the women's movement started in earnest. There was a lot of religious upheaval, kind of fighting back against, sort of the European Puritan way of thinking. And so a lot of the writing kind of reflected that. And I think there's a lot of sort of that revolutionary spirit in a lot of entrepreneurs. And so every day you'll find a reading from Thoreau or Louisa May Alcott or Margaret Fuller or Willa Cather, and obviously Emerson, Melville, Poe. I mean, just a lot of the stuff that many of us were asked to read in high school is still, I think, today some of the best literature in kind of throughout American literature. So there's a reading from some the thing that I think applies to entrepreneurs, and then I kind of riff on it for about 100 words, 200 words, applying it to what I think the modern entrepreneur goes through, and then every day ends with a question that hopefully kind of challenges you on the theme of that day's reading to give you a little reflection. So very hard book to write. I would
imagine.
Very satisfying because it allowed me to really kind of go back and revisit a lot of that literature. And so you can look at it as almost a cliff notes to a lot of that literature. But it's just kind of meant to be a light, easy to read. Pick it up a day at a time. And so I'm looking forward to that. That'll be out in October of 2019.
And a lot different from many of the books you read on business.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, this daily format is proven. Some people might be familiar with a very popular one right now called The Daily Stoic, written by Ryan Holiday. Peter Drucker, I think, I'm not sure he wrote it, but somebody collected all his works, and you can find a book called The Daily Drucker. So the format's somewhat proven, but it's certainly a very different book for me.
That'll be out in October, you said?
October of 2019. That's right. Yeah, just in time for Christmas. These books make good, good Christmas gifts, just because you start off the year in January again. So
That's great. I'm looking forward to reading it.
well, thank you. Yeah, hopefully it'll make sense to people. I know just in the circles I run in my network, self-reliance, that Ralph Waldo Emerson essay is one that gets bantered around a lot. And, there's so much quotable material in there that applies to kind of doing your own thing and being your own person that I think a lot of entrepreneurs have kind of gravitated towards it.
So let's talk about your experience as a speaker. Were you speaking professionally before you wrote the books, or did writing the books help launch your career?
I was speaking professionally, and truthfully, it's because I saw it as the best way to get consulting clients. So I really started off, speaking at the junior college, on marketing for, the program that they had for adults who had had businesses, and kind of worked my way from doing, that type of thing to then, associations locally and whatnot. And so I was, in some cases, being paid. Some cases I just saw it as a great lead generation opportunity. But that, once I started blogging and writing online, and people started using online resources to find people, I did start branching outside of my local community as a paid speaker. But there is no question that when my first book did come out, which was in 2006, I'd been speaking for 3 or 4 years, but there really wasn't huge demand. It was just people that would find me because I was easy to find. Once the book not only came out, but sold well, hit a couple of the bestseller lists, then all of a sudden, people started seeking me out, and I quadrupled, quite frankly, my speaking fees, just because that's what they expected to pay a best-selling author.
That was the first duct tape book, correct?
That's right. Yes. Duct Tape Marketing. That's right. So that came out in about 2006, 2007. And really, ever since then, I do about 20 to 25 paid speaking gigs a year.
Hey, I got to tell you, when that book came out, that's when I first learned about you and your consulting and all. And when I saw the name of the book with duct tape, I went, oh my God, that's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Well, fortunately, a few people had that reaction, and so that certainly got a lot of attention, and had even media outlets kind of when they started going out and trying to interview people who were doing online marketing or blogging, that name kind of helped kind of propel me to the front of the list in some cases.
Did you find writing your books to be a daunting task, or did it come fairly easy to you?
I always tell people that it took me about 20 years to write my first book. And I think that's, basically what I wrote about was what I'd been doing. I mean, I had developed a systematic approach to marketing with small businesses, because I didn't want to get a big staff and do it in a very traditional way. I wanted to be able to walk in and say, here's what I'm going to do. Here's what you're going to do. Here's the results we hope to get. And here's what it costs. Do you want it or not? And essentially that was the genesis, quite frankly, of the name Duct Tape Marketing. That was prior to the book. That was really the name of my marketing approach, and I wanted to start making a course and documenting it, and so the name actually came about as a way to kind of have much more of a brand name than John's Great System. So in a lot of ways, the first book was the easiest to write, because it really was stuff that I had been writing about, talking about, speaking about, and I just needed to get it down. Subsequent books, then the publisher says, okay, we want you to write another book. And, what do you want to write about? And so now all of a sudden your sophomore book, if you will, a lot of times, becomes, in my particular case, became something that I had to really focus on. Okay, what's the structure of this going to be? What am I going to talk about? What's my big idea? Where Duct Tape Marketing kind of just felt like me collecting what I'd been teaching and preaching for a number of years.
Well, writing a book is such a large undertaking, and
it is.
And to go through that process, it's certainly got to be worth it. What do you see as the greatest benefit to a speaker once they've written a book?
Well, I think it's to anyone. I mean, if today's task as a marketer, as a speaker, is to build authority and be seen as an expert and get some level of notoriety. I mean, I always used to joke that after I had a best-selling book, nobody cared if I was any good anymore. They just assumed that you could come do the deal, and you had a fee. And even if you're the local accountant and you're all you're trying to do is be seen as an expert, having a book on a topic that people care about can certainly do a lot for you.
So it adds to your credibility. Lead generation must increase.
Yeah, and frankly, it's not. It doesn't have the cachet that it once did, frankly, because it used to be very hard to write a book or publish a book. The only avenue was that you got a mainstream publisher to think you had a great idea and somehow got a book deal, and so that back when that was really the only avenue, the publisher sort of controlled a lot of the ability for somebody to even have a book. But as the digital world came along, as printing became easier, as you started having distribution resources like Amazons of the world, really, and this is not to belittle the process at all, but really anybody now can have a book. And so in a lot of ways, you have to have a very strong objective about what you're going to try to do with the book. Just having the book is not enough to stand out almost anymore. I mean, if you don't have a book and you're a marketing consultant, you probably that's almost become like having a website, it feels like. But having an objective of what you're going to do with that book is really, I think, what makes it valuable.
In either case, whether it was the traditional publishing or self-publishing today that a lot of people are doing, one of the major aspects of it, of course, is marketing that book. It doesn't market itself.
That's right. Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. I mean, one of the fallacies of a lot of authors, first-time authors particularly, who say get a traditional publishing deal is they feel like, great, the publisher's gonna sell my book for me, and the publisher's customer is the bookstore. And they go out and sell potentially some bookstores. So you have some distribution, right out of the box. But, let's face it, the bookstores are carrying very little inventory anymore. And if that book doesn't sell, they're sending it back to the publishers. So the author of the book today is certainly has to, spend a year or more, building an audience, building a platform, getting out there and telling everybody about the book if they really want to sell it. But again, going back to what I said about the objectives, if you are somebody who wants to grow your expertise in your community, wants to maybe do speaking in your community, you don't have to sell thousands and thousands of books. The book just has to be well received. People have to find value in it. You have to definitely go out there and push it. But a lot of people feel like the payoff of being seen as kind of the chosen expert in a certain topic is worth the investment in publishing the book and maybe giving it away, even because you get it in enough people's hands who are then going to help you meet your other objectives.
I've noticed a lot of people, the meeting planners, if you will, or organizations putting on events, they'll go to people who've written books to have them come in and speak, but they might not even know if they're a good speaker or not. They're equating writing and speaking as being one and the same.
That's right.
From your personal experience, do you see them going hand in hand, or are they really entirely different disciplines?
They're really entirely different disciplines, very much so. Obviously, having a good idea, being able to simplify that idea and articulate it is key to both of them, frankly, being successful. But half of speaking is the information, half of it is what you might call the performance, the ability to live in a completely different environment, get your idea across with your body, your voice, your emotions, your movement is a part of what the most effective speakers are able to do.
Timing's involved there, a lot of things, and you can't just go back and delete it.
Well, there is an aspect to editing, though. I mean, there's certainly over the years I've given a talk that has very, a very similar feel to it that I'm constantly updating and editing because, something didn't work or because I found a better way to say something.
What's the advice that you have for our listeners who are thinking about writing a book?
Well, the hardest thing for most people, 90% of the people out there that have said they're going to write a book, never get started. So, think about, you just got to find a way to simplify the process. What's your big idea? Does the world need another book like XYZ? What's your unique take? What's your unique point of view? How can you summarize that in a way that's going to be of value? And again, we're talking, mostly about nonfiction, I assume here, but so kind of having a story to tell, but then also having something that's going to be of value to somebody that, let's face it, today, has to be different. I because I've written books, because I have a podcast and have forever, I get 5 books a week sent to me by publishers. And I got to tell you, particularly in the marketing category, very few of them are saying anything new or revolutionary. So, how do you find kind of that unique point of view? That's going to be an essential part of what is the thread that runs through your book, if it's going to be successful or useful. For me, it was literally the idea that marketing is a system in your business. And, still today, I find that that's a unique point of view for marketers, or certainly for small business owners. And that's, I think, to a large degree, that's been the success of both my books and just the duct tape marketing approach. I now have a network of about 150 consultants around the world that license the duct tape marketing methodology and system and work now with small business owners all over the world. And that, going from an idea to documenting an idea to a book, to a course, to a consulting practice, and then to an entire network, is because there's a thread that runs through that entire idea. And I think that's another element that a lot of people underestimate. I really didn't set out to write a book so that it would be a best-selling book. I wrote a book because it would help me get speaking, because it would help me get attention, because there were so many other objectives in writing a book that kind of all go together. And that I think is another key. Unless you've got the next best selling idea of a book, your book is only going to be as good as you find ways to leverage that you have it.
Once they get started, what are some of the pitfalls they're going to run into?
I think the biggest one is, overthinking it. There's a book that I quote all the time about writing called Bird by Bird, a woman named Anne Lamott. And it is, she is a successful author, and it's her kind of book on advice. She does a lot of teaching of creative writing courses and things, and it's her book on advice on how to do writing. And I won't ruin your PG rating because she uses a curse word in the title of that chapter. But basically, it the essence of it is just get it down. Your first effort, your first draft is not going to be good necessarily. It's not going to be the finished thing, but just kind of get it all down, start writing, start outlining, start, refining, start testing it, start talking to people about it. And it'll come around. But if you never do that part of it, you'll never get to the part where you actually make it better.
Where do you think they should get help? Editors, design, any particular areas, or all these areas?
The traditional process, of course, involves those things that you said. A lot of times having an editor who is going to look at your book globally, like, what's your big idea? Does it run through here? Do the chapters, relate and hang together? It's kind of that structural editing. I think that can be extremely valuable, especially for somebody who doesn't have a lot of experience in writing. It's pretty easy to get discombobulated over 70,000 words. And so that's a part. But then I'll tell you, if you've only got X dollars, spend it on a copy editor or two, because making silly mistakes, being wordy, leaving out commas, having typos, that just, for a lot of people, not for everybody, some people can get past that. For a lot of readers, will shut the book immediately once they find 3 of those, because it just kind of cuts your credibility with them. So a good copy editor can edit a book in a week, just looking for the stupid mistakes, that we all make, when we're just writing, and you no longer can see because what the book is supposed to say. So I would definitely spend money there. And then, as you said, design can make a big difference too. If you've got a physical printed book, there's no question sitting on a bookshelf, there's certain things that make a book pop.
Just like any other type of marketing, there's things at work that you have to do. And
that's right.
I've noticed books that you can look at them and you just know they were self-published, which is not necessarily a bad thing at all, but they didn't take time to have a professional book designer design the cover.
Yeah.
It just doesn't measure up. And I think you lose credibility, talking about judging a book by its cover.
Right.
You lose credibility instantly.
Well, particularly when you're going to be placed amongst the competition. Let's face it. That's kind of a way to think about the marketing is, what are you going to do to stand out? Because, people are going to scan that bookshelf, or they're going to scan the online bookstore, and they're going to make decisions without diving too deeply into the book. So that is kind of your front door, if you will, to, hey, this is why you ought to buy me.
Right. And it's great to get on that shelf. But if you're competing with people like you and Seth Godin and the like, and you can't compete, you're that far out of the ballpark, well, it's unfortunate. All right. Our listeners are revved up and raring to go. What's that first step you think they should do, that first minor one?
Well, I mean, the very first thing is, what's the big idea? I think a book needs to have a big idea that somehow differentiates it, or that you at least think, who is my target audience for this book? What problem do they have that I can promise to solve with this book? I think if you don't get that down and you just start writing about your profession, or about how you go to work, or how you solve this issue and that issue, it's going to be very difficult for somebody to get interested in another book along those lines. Because I hate to say it, but every industry, every how-to kind of thing is out there right now. I mean, it's either in a book already, or it's on one of the millions of blogs that's out there. So you've got to come up with, I think, a promise to solve a problem for a specific audience that really allows your book to be different than the scores of books that they can probably find, or writings that they can probably find, that are just telling them how to do something that others are telling them how to do.
Well, great. I think this is great advice, and I hope some of our listeners take it and actually take the ideas they have and get it down on paper and distribute it to others so they can learn from it as well. I'm sure they have some fresh ideas somewhere back there that they can hopefully share. Hey, John, where can our listeners go to learn more about you, your services, and your podcast as well?
You bet. So you can find pretty much everything that I do at ducttapemarketing.com, and that's DUCTTAPE marketing.com.
How often does your podcast come out?
So we do at least 2, and then every now and then 3 shows a week. So I've been podcasting now since 2005, whatever that works out to, 14 years.
Wow.
And have been, I don't think I've missed many weeks without any shows in that period of time.
That's something to be proud of. Hey, I listen to it all the time. I've been listening to it for quite a while. I don't know if it's back to the beginning, but for many years now.
Yeah.
I find it brings a lot to light and some great ideas that you share and your guests share with the listeners, and I appreciate it, and I know my listeners will appreciate listening as well. Well, John, thanks for being with us here today. I really appreciate it, and I wish you best of luck with your upcoming book.
I appreciate that.
That's a wrap of another episode of Public Speaking with Peter George. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Tune in Monday when you'll hear another episode of Public Speaking with Peter George, and again Thursday for your next episode of Quick Bites, public speaking tips and techniques you can digest in 5 minutes or less. Until next time, remember, when it comes to speaking in public, you've got this.